I think that Mrs. Cullen can't have any kids, though, she added, as if that lessened their kindness. Throughout all this conversation, my eyes flickered again and again to the table where the strange family sat. They continued to look at the walls and not eat. Had they always lived in Forks? I asked. Surely I would have noticed them on one of my summers here. No, she said in a voice that implied it should be obvious, even to a new arrival like me. They just moved down 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska. I felt a surge of pity and relief. Pity because, as beautiful as they were outsiders, clearly not accepted. Relief that I wasn't the only newcomer here, and certainly not the most interesting by any standard. Which explains why all these people are flocking to you. They are flocking to you. And not to them. Let's see here, where am I? As I examined them, the youngest, one of the Cullens, looked up and met my gaze, this time with evident curiosity in his expression. As I looked swiftly away, it seemed to me that his glance held some kind of unmet expectation. "Which one is the boy with the reddish-brown hair?" I asked. I peeked at him from the corner of my eye, and he was still staring at me, but not gawking like the other students had today. He had a slightly frustrated expression. I looked down again. "That's Edward. He's gorgeous, of course, but don't waste your time. He doesn't date. Apparently none of the girls here are good-looking enough for him." She sniffed, a clear case of sour grapes. I wondered when he'd turn her down. I bit my lip to hide my smile. "Because, you know, you're gonna get in his pants, bitch." Then I glanced at him again. His face was turned away, but I thought his cheek appeared lifted as if he were smiling too. After a few more minutes, the four of them left the table together. They were all noticeably graceful, even the big, brawny one. It was unsettling to watch. The one named Edward didn't look at me again. I sat at the table with Jessica and her friends longer than I would have if I had been sitting alone. I was anxious not to be late for class on my first day. One of my new acquaintances, who considerately reminded me that her name was Angela, had biology 2 with me the next hour. We walked to class together in silence. She was shy too. When we entered the classroom, Angela went to sit at a black-top lab table exactly like the ones I was used to. She already had a neighbor. In fact, all the tables were filled but one. Next to the center aisle, I recognized Edward Cullen by his unusual hair, sitting next to that single open seat. As I walked down the aisle, foreshadowing? To introduce myself to the teacher and get my slip signed, I was watching him surreptitiously. Just as I passed, he suddenly went rigid in his seat. He stared at me again, meeting my eyes with the strangest expression on his face. It was hostile, furious. I looked away quickly, shocked, going red again. I stumbled over a book in the walkway and had to catch myself on the edge of a table. The girl sitting there giggled. I'd noticed that his eyes were black, coal black. Mr. Banner signed my slip and handed me a book with no nonsense about introductions. I could tell we were going to get along. Of course, he had no choice but to send me to the one open seat in the middle of the room. I kept my eyes down as I went to sit by him, bewildered by the antagonistic stare he'd given me. I didn't look up as I set my book on the table and took my seat, but I saw his posture change from the corner of my eye. He was leaning away from me, sitting on the extreme edge of his chair and averting his face like he smelled something bad. Inconspicuously, I sniffed my hair. How does one inconspicuously sniff their hair? Think about that. It smelled like strawberries, the scent of my favorite shampoo. It seemed an innocent enough odor. I let my hair fall over my right shoulder, making a dark curtain between us, and tried to pay attention to the teacher. Unfortunately, the lecture was on cellular anatomy, something I'd already studied. Wow. Really? Once more we have another easy-ass class. Come on. I took notes carefully anyways, always looking down. I couldn't stop myself from peeking occasionally through the screen of my hair at the strange boy next to me. During the whole class, he never relaxed his stiff position on the edge of his chair, sitting as far from me as possible. I could see his hand on his left leg was clenched into a fist, tendons standing out under his pale skin. This, too, he never relaxed. He had the long sleeves of his white shirt pushed up to his elbows, and his forearm was surprisingly hard and muscular beneath his light skin. He wasn't nearly as slight as he looked next to his burly brother. The class seemed to drag on longer than the others. Was it because the day was finally coming to a close, or because I was waiting for his tight fist to loosen? It never did. He continued to sit so still it looked like he wasn't breathing. What was wrong with him? Was this his normal behavior? I questioned my judgment on Jessica's bitterness at lunch today. Maybe she was not as resentful as I thought. It couldn't have anything to do with me. He didn't know me from Eve. I peeked up at him one more time and regretted it. He was glaring down at me again, his black eyes full of revulsion. As I flinched away from him, shrinking against my chair, the phrase, "if looks could kill," suddenly ran through my mind. At that moment, the bell rang loudly, making me jump, and Edward Cullen was out of his seat. Fluidly he rose. He was much taller than I thought, his back to me, and he was out the door before anyone else was out of their seat. Doesn't he have a backpack? Why don't any of the Cullens carry around a backpack? Or carry around their books? That's what normal high school students do, you know. Weird. I sat frozen in my seat, staring blankly after him. He was so mean. It wasn't fair. Boo fuckity hoo. Derp derp. I began gathering up my things slowly, trying to block the anger that filled me, for fear my eyes would tear up. For some reason, my temper was hardwired to my tear ducts. I usually cried when I was angry, a humiliating tendency. Why are you angry? You don't even know this guy, and you're upset because he didn't say anything to you. Seriously, are you trying to convince us that you're already in love with him? Fucking cunt. Aren't you Isabella Swan? A male voice asked. I looked up to see a cute baby-faced boy, his pale blonde hair carefully gelled into orderly spikes, smiling at me in a friendly way. He obviously didn't think I smelled bad. Bella, I corrected him with a smile. I'm Mike. Hi, Mike. Do you need any help finding your next class? I'm headed to the gym, actually. I think I can find it. That's my next class, too. He seemed thrilled, though it wasn't that big of a coincidence in a school this small. We walked to class together. He was a chatterer. He supplied most of the conversation, which made it easy for me. He lived in California till he was 10, so he knew how I felt about the sun. It turned out he was in my English class also. He was the nicest person I'd met today. Now this is something that Stephenie Meyer does that bothers me. She is pretty much devoid of dialogue unless she's talking about Edward Cullen. Unless the conversation directly involves Edward, there is no dialogue. It's just, he said this, and he lived in California till he was 10. Not Mike said, I lived in California till I was 10. Come on. Really? So stupid. But as we were entering the gym, he asked, So, did you stab Edward Cullen with a pencil or what? I'd never seen him act like that. I cringed, so I wasn't the only one who had noticed, and apparently that wasn't Edward Cullen's usual behavior. I decided to play dumb. Was that the boy I sat next to in biology? I asked artlessly. Yes, he said. He looked like he was in pain or something. I don't know, I responded. I never spoke to him. He's a weird guy. Mike lingered by me instead of heading to the dressing room. It's called a locker room. If I were lucky enough to sit by you, I would have talked to you. I smiled at him before walking to the girls' locker room. He was friendly and clearly admiring, but it wasn't enough to ease my irritation. Really? Because suddenly boys are fawning over you, unlike what they were doing at your old school, and it's still not enough to ease your fears. Seriously, if I was in her position and guys, especially if he's a seemingly punk guy from the description, if he was talking to me, I'd be pretty excited. That would have just brightened my mood considerably. I would have forgotten all about Edward Cullen, because Mike's not a dick. Edward Cullen is. The gym teacher, Coach Clapp, found me a uniform but didn't make me dress down for today's class. At home, only 2 years of RE were required. Here, PE was mandatory all 4 years. Forks was literally my personal hell on earth.